For now, we have Catalin Mitelut, CEO of Netholabs. Catalin is a leader in the neurotech space, and today he'll be taking us through cutting edge of mind and technology convergence. Prepare to have your mind blown away, because today we're talking about accelerating the development of whole brain emulation and mind uploading. Catalin, welcome on stage.
Thank you.
I'll take it.
Yes, thank you. I'm just looking for the clicker. Is it? Oh, okay. Sorry about that. All right. Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be on stage with so many extraordinary minds. I just wanted to mention that I'm a recovering academic, and I'll start talking to you today about, essentially it's 4 weeks ago I've quit academia. I've tried for a very, very long time to work on what I think is holistic neuroscience, a very important step in moving beyond mechanisms and reductionism. And I found avenues only in this community, so I'm very happy and to be here. I'm going to start my talk by just showing a very quick prop. I'll probably be the only person showing props today. So this is a 3D printed skull of a mouse. You probably can't see it. That's the point of it. It's extremely small. The entire brain is smaller than the tip of your pinky. And we've spent billions of dollars in the last, whatever, depending on when you count, like 50 years or so, trying to understand that brain. And we're not doing a great job. I think there's lots of amazing things we found, including how molecules lead to disease and genetic factors. The Allen Institute and the Blue Brain Project have spent on the order of something like $1 billion trying to build mechanistic models, and we're still struggling to that. So today I'm going to tell you about my essentially a 10-year basically personal project to get to holistic neuroscience. I'm going to tell you about my 30-year obsession with free will and agency, to try to demystify what the neuroscience of free will, and essentially what free will is from a mechanistic perspective. So I'm going to give you a little bit of it's probably a bit more structured talk than you've seen. This closer. It's a hybrid between a general science talk and a more fun kind of neurotech talk. I'm going to speak a little bit about what whole brain emulation is, as an attempt to build holistic models of brains, define the two terms, and then tell you a little about my efforts at Netholabs and what might be coming next. Just a quick plug: this afternoon there's another summit. I'll be speaking about actually BCIs for whole brain emulation in particular, if you want to come see me there. So what I think that that emulators are these things that we're trying to create, these copies, mind uploads, digital minds, digital twins, whatever you want to call them, bring three very exciting fields together. This idea of whole brain emulation, which has been pursued, or at least been a thought for about, I'll say 30, 40 years since people have been thinking about it. Neuroscience of free will and agency, which I'm very much interested in. I've spent basically my entire neuroscience career on, and then AGI and AI safety. And the first bit is about digitizing minds, of course. We want to maybe have an alternative path to AGI that we can interpret. It might be safer. The second one is demystify free action. I think Trent and others have spoken a lot about this. What the heck is freedom? What does it mean to choose things from moment to moment? I've obsessed about this for a very long time. So I think we are on the verge of really, my personal opinion, I'll give it to you with a big star, is that it's a bitter pill. We don't have free will in the way we think there, but we should be able to use it to our advantage, not to let other forces push us along. And of course, the AI safety. Can we have a better understandable AGI? Something that we can interact with much better. So I think making emulators really it's a turning point in history. I know there's a bunch of turning points, and accelerationism is letting us do that, but it's really very special, at least for me. My research goals really to generate the large data sets. I'm kind of on the data set generation side, even though I have to innovate a lot on the neurotech. I'm trying to generate these really big data sets that will be used to make these systems possible. And I'm trying to convert this to a relatively simple, at least for now, neurotech problem. So what is whole brain emulation? Well, I think the Nick and Anders' roadmap from almost 20 years ago now is still very good. I strongly encourage you to read it. Maybe not all of it, because it's got lots of technical things that are not all held up, but for the most part, really, it's very right. And what essentially whole brain emulation is an attempt to model the brain essentially on a one-to-one fashion. We notice that there's nothing about mechanisms or figuring out how things work. Just we want to model it. And essentially, what it means is that we want to have digital organisms that have human-like brain dynamics, whatever that means. So if you have a forward model, so that there's two main paths. This is the high-fidelity structure. Right? So what do we want to do here? We want to take the brain, we want to scan it with extremely low resolution. That little red bar is about 1 micrometer. And we want to scan it, and we want to build some kind of a digital version of that and play it forward. Now, I'll show you a bit more about that. And the alternative is low-fidelity whole brain emulation, which is kind of what our entire societies and our entire basically big IT companies I'll tell you about in a moment are doing, which is essentially modeling behavior dynamics. You want to model a bunch of things like neural dynamics, the behavior of some organisms like a mouse here, which has become so fundamental to basic neuroscience. and then figure out how to generate digital copies of that organism that way. So why pursue whole brain emulation? I think these are probably obvious to most of the people in this room. I think it is a logical endpoint to a lot of neuroscience. For me, it's actually the logical endpoint of all of science, but I'm a little bit biased because to me, neuroscience is the culmination of all of science. It's a test bed for doing many, many amazing and wonderful things if you're interested in how the world works and how the brain works. Of course, infinite utility, but that's obvious to everyone in this room, I hope. Digital immortality, maybe that's not as obvious, but I think this is another way to do the types of things that Trent's been talking about. And of course, maybe we have a slightly better way of interacting with the next generation of entities in this world, or maybe we become them and we can interface better. Of course, there's a huge risk. Maybe whole brain emulation will be the most dangerous thing we build, as opposed to language-based artificial intelligence, but we don't know yet. We have to always keep an eye out on that. So very brief introduction to high-fidelity whole brain emulation. Essentially, this approach relies historically on electron microscopy, so taking a small bit of tissue, scanning it with an electron microscope, really reconstructing it, so having a digital copy of that, then simulating it. So the way we do that, we basically reconstruct it in the computer using things like cable theory, so the little compartments of the neuron, the neuron gets broken up to little chunks, and each of those little chunks has its own little brain dynamics or neurodynamics. We need to pick a model here on the bottom right. It's essentially, our ability to simulate what single neurons do it depends on the kinds of model we pick on the bottom right, and they're very prohibitive models and difficult models to run that have a lot of complex neurodynamics. On the top left are integrating fire, the simple things. I won't bore you too much with the details, but we have a whole array of things to pick from when we want to build these forward models. This has already kind of been happening in one way or another with very interesting results. The most famous, of course, being Henry Markram selling the $1 billion project to the European Union, saying that he's going to basically upload himself in 10 years. So both the Allen Institute, where I worked for a bit, and Blue Brain tried to do these four models, which relied on a very simple premise, which is you go into usually a slice of rat or mouse brain tissue, you patch them, meaning you record this individual neurons as they're doing their thing, but you can only do this probably dozens or hundreds of neurons. But nonetheless, if you have a dozen neurons or a few hundred neurons, you just copy them over and over again, and you create these networks with these duplicated or connected neurons, and you play them forward, and you see, are they doing the types of things we think real neurons or real brains are doing? And these are some simulations. I won't play them that I generated when I was there. The alternative path is to actually try to do this in a living organism. So the way to do this, if you're familiar with, a little bit with functional magnetic resonance imaging, essentially you want to parcellate the brain. So we can start with a very coarse way to record from the brain. So this is like a mouse brain, and we can break up the brain, let's say, into 10 compartments or 100 compartments. Doesn't really matter. And we record, we put some kind of wire in these brains. This is like really, really old technology from like the 50s or 60s. We already had this. This is why for people like me, it's been very frustrating that we have not pursued this kind of holistic neuroscience approach. Nonetheless, what you want to do is you want to, in each of these little areas you record some kind of time series, which are the blue, and then you record some behavior. What does the animal do in this time, which is the green? And then you build an emulator. You try to model this dynamics jointly. And then you hope that the technology scales. So over time, you're now able to record from 10 areas, and then you can record from 100, maybe from 1,000, from 1,000,000 areas, right? As the technology improves. So it becomes scalable, and then you have these models that increasingly improve over time. This is a very clear roadmap. This is the one I pitched. I've been pitching for a while now, and this is the one that Foresight has agreed to support me with a generous grant to start this work. The goal fundamentally is to have essentially an emulator or a digital mind or a digital organism that takes as input, the red and black is the brain activity and the behavior of some organism at some time point over time, so time minus 1 times 0, and then it can generate what happens next in terms of brain dynamics and behavior. So this is kind of the really boots on the ground, kind of simple hypothesis that we work under. Again, similar science to low fidelity or this kind of functional whole brain emulation. Pretty much language models are almost a one-to-one. This is why it's so exciting to be able to pursue this now. It's a one-to-one phenomenon. Essentially, we've simulated knowledge generation without understanding how. We've taken, on the x-axis there is the amount of knowledge or the complexity of knowledge, and just fed it into a bunch of artificial neural networks, and they seem to start doing better, right? So the green line goes up, and X-Rix is probably somewhere there. We're going to reach AGI, whatever that means for you, and ASI. I don't know if ASI will be language model-based, but it doesn't matter. And consciousness possibly as well, as many people are speculating. Well, whole brain emulators are essentially that. We're going to try to do exactly the same thing. So we have the same type of plot on the y-axis here. Now we have how good the copy or the digital mind is. And on the x-axis, we have the level of granularity. How detailed can we record from the brain, right? Whether we do it structurally or functionally, it doesn't matter. How granular, how detailed our neural data set is. To give you a little reference point is on the bottom right there, essentially what Google, Facebook, and TikTok, and basically all information technology companies are doing. They're really collecting our behavior data and building little models of us. And they have probably general models and with a little bit of fine-tuning on each and every one of us. And just to bring it all the way back to the point of free will, it's not clear just how unique each of us really fundamentally are. Probably we're just a little bit like 5% or 10% fine-tuning some amazing, really, really good model of what human beings are. So I'll just leave you a little bit with that thought. I'll return to this in a moment. So I provide a little bit of background why these, where essentially lo-fi brain emulation lies. This is a very famous systems neuroscience, system computational neuroscience figured from about 30-something years ago. Patricia Churchton, Terry Shinaki, many other people that are really, really big in philosophy, neuroscience, and such, et cetera, have been looking at this. What computational neuroscience is trying to do is trying to create this reductionist mechanistic explanation. You want to go through all these levels. You want to know how molecules give rise to cells, to synapses, and so on, all the way up to the top. And of course, what's silly, missing from this, of course, is consciousness. We actually really care about consciousness a lot. I would say probably there's many people that just only care about consciousness. They believe that the fundamental goal of brains is to generate consciousness. So they don't have that, and that is quite silly. In any case, depending on where you take your starting point, let's say for the last 100 years or so that we've been doing neuroscience, we've been trying to fill in these reductionist or explanationist explanatory mechanisms. We don't have all of them. Definitely, as you move up the chain, you don't have. We just don't know how things work, especially at the top here, as you try to explain how cells behave in terms of synapses, etc. Our mechanisms get quite our mechanistic explanation get quite thin. And what are we doing? Well, we're fitting actually artificial neural networks. Okay, and that's kind of the major takeaway I want to give you here. It's not that neuroscientists are giving up on mechanistic explanation. It's just that we are starting to put these little bits of black boxes in our explanatory tree. And one of the most famous papers being LFATs, it doesn't matter. It's just the papers which just kind of replace mechanistic explanation with a neural network are probably going to become dominant, and they already have. I worked at the Zuckerman Institute at Columbia University for a while, and there's a floor of something like 80 to 100 theoretical and computational neuroscientists, the biggest in the world, and they all predicted about 5-6 years ago, well, even more than actually 10 now, that everybody's going to just switch over to neural networks, forget about closed form expressions for everything. And this level of explanation is roughly, this is again from the 2008 roadmap that I mentioned earlier, this is roughly the level of explanatory, or not explanatory, excuse me, of granularity of our whole brain emulators. It kind of fits in that world. So some obvious probably things. Why is this possible? Very exciting. AI's moved along very fast. So the ability to have time series models are increasingly powerful really enables all of this to happen. Increasing interest from Neuralink and others that are making these stacks. I'm going to talk a lot about the Neuralink stack this afternoon if you want to come in, and I'll tell you just how simple it is and how it is possible to still enter in this field and provide contributions, and of course the DIY. A lot of these technologies are available for like $500-600. You have access to probably a chip that took $500 million to make. Yeah, of course, I have some sciencey stuff here. If you really, really care about consciousness, I wanted to just say one slide. I know there's somebody else also speaking about consciousness, but we really don't know what consciousness is. It appears to occur or arise out of a certain type of interactive dynamic in the brain. The point I want to make here is that there's no magic sauce. As far as we can tell, there's a bunch of neurons that come together, do a certain type of interaction over time, and we can probably emulate this. That means that you can probably inject these kinds of processor dynamics into artificial systems. This is why, and I've talked about this before, it's so bizarre to me that the brain works like this. You can actually, during live brain surgery, people still get electrical input, and they can experience things like visual things, stimulus. You can even experience the will to do something. So imagine that somebody puts a little electrical current into somewhere in your pre-supplementary motor area, and you feel like you want to do something, get up or grab something. That just blows my mind, because fundamentally, I would have thought the fundamental complexity of the brain is way more than that. You really need to kind of have these 6 neurons interact with these 3 neurons in some kind of chain, and then the other million neurons in support. It doesn't seem to be like that. We really can do that, and this is why I think that fundamentally, once you get to supercomputers that actually can run emulators, they probably will also experience that. And I know a lot of people in the AI community already think that language model agents have some type of consciousness or sentience. One small plug for my area, I'm very, very much interested in neuroethology. I'm building the world's most advanced mouse behavior cages. They're going to collect billions to trillions of data points. We're going to try to feed them to the community. We're going to figure out what that model looks like. But the point here, I just really want to make that all of neuroscience has been the Allen Institute and everybody else in the world have been studying these little patches of color patches, which are called stimulus-evoked neurodynamics. So when you take a mouse and you show it a video, or take a human and show it a video, or a monkey, you play a tone or smell or a video or something like that, the neurodynamics form a very small part of the possible dynamics that their brain can generate. Spontaneous activity when they're sitting still and they're not focusing on a very specific sensory-driven task are substantially more. This is multidimensional scaling. This is a nonlinear plot, so the gray area there, or the inner area, is much, much, much larger than the little one. So I'm very, very much interested. We want to become the Waymo of whole-brain emulation, essentially generate tremendous amount of data for the community and others to look at. And this is my expertise. Basically, I've spent a lot of my time trying to convert all the human neuroscience of free will work into mouse. And yes, it does work. Surprise, nobody's surprised. So again, some more obvious things, what we want to do. We might need some somewhat specialized architectures to achieve this, but this is doable. We need lots of data, of course, and we need to work on this. Classical, traditional academic labs are not doing that. And of course, we want to replicate scaling laws. This is one of my first approaches. How well does this work? I think Michael's in the back there. Other people are also going to probably work on these scaling laws as well. And I guess my final comment really is that we are probably in a race between a language model-based AI and whole brain emulation. We're not sure where we're going to land on this map. I already showed this before. Yeah. My final slide, essentially, I think whole brain emulation is becoming increasingly viable. There's really the fact that we can start to model time series extremely well with very large data without having mechanistic explanation is very, very telling of where this field goes. There's really nothing prohibitory about doing this. There's no magic sauce to consciousness. There's no magic sauce to free will. We have to accept that, and we have to kind of start flowing with reality, as I would say, and not think about fantastical things. I gave a talk yesterday about the magic of free will, etc. So I am talking about the Cognitive Liberty Summit. I'm going to talk more specifically about brain-computer interfaces and how to build probably electrodes for the next generation of this type of work. So that's it. Thank you so much for your attention and foresight.
Thank you, Catalin. I know we have a question right here.
Hi. One of the things that I see kind of missing, and I'd love your opinion on it, is the work by Stuart Hameroff on microtubules. And apparently there has been some movement forward in the area of superradiance. And what I'm seeing with regards to what Roger Penrose had recently been talking about is this idea that there's a gap between free will and time dilation. And that the gap, I believe, this is what I'm thinking, is the difference between the speed of light and how electricity actually forms, and superintelligence, and this quantum superposition that's happening at the microtubule level. Do you have any opinions as to quantum biology and how it is the black boxes that might explain a lot of those things?
I don't have specific opinions on this. I really love tubules and the idea that they're probably somewhat involved or interesting path to pursue. The hope is that this holistic approach to neuroscience kind of captures it all, right? We're not going to be obsessed about glia or astrocytes or neurons or inhibitory neurons or excitatory neurons or synapses or a whole bunch of other things that neuroscientists that are basically taking 99.99% of the budgets from the governments and from also from VCs, to be honest, are spending time on. So if we do holistic neuroscience, in principle, we'll capture that. I probably can't speculate too much on the fundamental or causal role that microtubules play. I'm happy to look, of course, at this opinion or hypothesis, yeah.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Catalin, again.